Hello, 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 everyone. We are live once again with the Corona Spotlight 2020. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Gayle Nicholson, and I am your host here. Today, I'm very, very excited to be joined by a gentleman who has had an incredible career, not just in the military, but as a helicopter pilot for other organizations as well, and who has created a space on the internet to build communities for people that I'm very, very excited about learning more about. So, will you please help me welcome Mr. Matthew Currin, founder of Convene Communities? Thanks for joining me today, Matthew. How are you?
Well, I'm doing well, Gail. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you taking the time to having me on today. So this is great. I'm excited.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Now, before we get into convene communities, because that's a great conversation, I'm very excited to learn about. Give us a little bit of just a short synopsis of your history and how you got to that point, because
Okay.
you've had some pretty exciting jobs, I think.
Yeah, I'll talk just a little bit about who I am and where I come from and a little bit about my career because to me it's just it's my everyday life, but I've had the opportunity to do some pretty great things. And so originally from North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, I went to UNC Greensboro, met my wife there, played baseball there. It was great. And then I became a Marine Corps pilot. So was a helicopter pilot in the Marine Corps. Did that for a long time, ended up getting medically retired out of the Marine Corps, unfortunately. But while I was in, I did some interesting things. I'll just touch on some of the highlights. I was part of the first people in Afghanistan. I entered Afghanistan November 2001. I was on vacation or leave prior to going in, when 9/11 happened.
Mm.
And so we got set to leave right away. And on the 12th and 13th, we were supposed to go up to New York City and we were supposed to fly bodies away from the World Trade Center, but there was no bodies.
Wow.
So we left on the 14th and started steaming straight over to Afghanistan. I left the ship and I went into Bahrain at the time, and I was locked in a room with General Mattis. Many of you may know him, the Secretary of Defense, recent Secretary of Defense. I actually was lucky enough to be in a room with him for about 5 days and planned how we were going into Afghanistan,
Not to
and then got
interrupt
into
you, but I've heard from many other people in the Marines that they would follow General Mattis into any scenario whatsoever. Trust him with their lives. He's a good man, and we're grateful for both his service as well as yours.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, when we were in the room planning, how we were going in, if General Mattis would have said, all right, gentlemen, run through that wall right there. Guess what we'd have done? We'd have stood up and run through the wall because that's the type of leader that he is. It's
Yeah.
just phenomenal. And at the time, I look back on it now as one of my proudest times of in the Marine Corps, just knowing that I sat in a room with him and was able to plan how we went into Afghanistan. And at the time, General Mattis was General Mattis, but now it's General Mattis, the legend. If you are if you are a Marine, he is not just a Marine. I mean, if you're in any branch of service, he's a legend, and yeah, he's just a great, great man. So I ended up, working for him and deployed into Afghanistan and did a lot of missions. I led a lot of the initial missions that happened in Afghanistan with you name it, Australian SAS, Special Forces, our Special Forces, Navy SEALs, CIA, Marines, Delta Force. So led a lot of stuff. So that was all interesting life at times.
That
As for a
sounds like
longer
it.
podcast, because I have a lot of stories. Left that once I was out. I worked in the V-22. I flew the helicopter that's right behind me. It's an airplane helicopter. Started a training program for that. Once I was medically retired, helped start the training program for that, and then I became a when I left that, I became an air medical pilot. So air medical, flying for Wake Forest Baptist University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and just around the country because I became a relief pilot. But I flew 659 patient flights, and
Wow.
so I've seen it all. I've seen a lot of people's lives change. Right there in front of my eyes, and not just them, but their families' lives. And so I really used to love that because I would go into the hospital with the flight paramedic and flight nurse, and while they're off doing their thing, working, I would take the time and talk to the families, and get them any directions they needed, maybe just talk to them about what I could do to help them, maybe say a prayer with them, whatever it might be. But just you're sitting there seeing these people's lives change right in front of you. So from there, I ended up being lucky enough to become the helicopter pilot for Team Penske, NASCAR, and Indy teams. So I'm Roger Penske's helicopter pilot.
That's that.
Of course.
That's cool. I'm sorry. That's just
Yeah. So we're in a little bit of a delay right now while we get over this COVID-19, ready to get back to racing and ready to get back into the tracks and watch it. We have three drivers: Brad Keselowski, Joe Logano, Ryan Blaney. But I'm lucky enough to work for one of the greatest, I think, greatest bosses on the face of the earth. Roger Penske is somebody who is one of the nicest people, but really just teaches people about leadership and how things work. He's just an amazing person.
I'm
So there's
sensing a pattern here, and they say that leaders are only as good as those who will follow them. So you're in quite good company, I'd say.
Yeah, I've been very lucky. I've been very lucky to be able to work for some good people and look up and just see some great examples. And one of the things I'll say about General Mattis and I'll say about Roger Penske, if you talk just about those two people themselves, Roger Penske, he when you see him talk, he takes credit for nothing. He gives credit to the people that work for him, and it's amazing just the type of person that he is, because he knows that all those great people that work for him are really help make him who he is, and he's just a great role model and a great example of who for me, somebody that I would love as a entrepreneur, if we're talking about Convene and other things that I would look up to as a model businessman for
Well,
sure.
awesome. Let's do that exactly as well. Let's talk a little bit about Convene Communities.
Okay.
How did that come about from the very beginning? I mean, how do you go from being a helicopter pilot to a techie guy that's setting up online communities for people to show up to and connect with? How does that come
Yeah.
about?
So how did it come about? I'm going to jump back to the Marine Corps. I'll jump back to July 9th of 2001, actually, even before predating, what we talked about 9/11 and deploying over there. And I was on a training mission flight this one particular night. I had a gentleman named Sergeant Clark Beatty, he was my combat crew chief, just the greatest guy. We were partners, and the day I checked into my squadron, he checked into the squadron at the same time. So I worked with him almost on all of my flights. He would be the person that I flew with. So when we would go in and we would get ready to fly, as a pilot, I would sign for the aircraft. So I would take possession of the aircraft. As the crew chief, they would sign the aircraft off, safe for flight. I ended up seeing Clark inside of the what was called maintenance control, and I was like, "Hey, brother, why aren't we flying together?" And he said, "Well, tonight I'm going to let you fly with this guy named Sergeant Salah. He's a new guy to the squadron, but tomorrow night we're scheduled." And not to make the story too long, but unfortunately, what ended up happening this night is I was the lead aircraft and the dash two, he was in the dash two aircraft, meaning the second aircraft. They made a 12-second human error inside that helicopter and they
Mm.
flew it right into the water. And unfortunately, three good Marines lost their life that night, and to include Clark Beatty. When I go out and I do a lot of public speaking, a lot of talking. I tell the whole story, and it really is heartbreaking because I lost one of my best friends that night.
Mm-hmm.
But what was heartbreaking about it is I found out within a day and a half later that the mishap, one of the causal factors of that mishap could have been avoided, that there had been a mishap a year and a half prior in another squadron, but they didn't share that information. They didn't share that lesson learned really outside of that squadron. So we could have made an aircraft change that would have caused, been able to avoid this mishap happening. if that communication had just taken place. So I kind of made a promise that night, to Clark Beatty, is that I wouldn't let this happen. That I would talk about decision making and speak about decision making and use his situation as an example, because I believe what I believe is that we all learn in life through experience,
Mhm.
and the more experience that we are able to go through, the better off we are. So it's just like Gail, it's like me and you sitting down and saying, "Hey, as a business person, as an entrepreneur, if you were in this situation, how would you handle it?" And so that's kind of the idea. Well, from that, believe it or not, that same concept has translated into what Convene Communities is today. Because of as I would go out and I would speak about decision making and time critical decision making, mostly in high risk environments, hospitals, manufacturing to business, people would come up to me afterwards and say, "Hey, Matt, I know you were just talking to me about being a first responder or being a nurse or working in this industry, but can I talk to you about my marriage, or can I talk to you about my relationship or parenting?" So I do have a master's degree in counseling from Liberty University, and so I spend a lot of time talking about those things. So to me, it became apparent that we can bring together communities of people that we can all learn from one another,
Mhm.
and that's really where Convene came from. It came from unfortunately, the loss of one of my best friends and the thought process of if we can avoid mistakes, if we can learn from our lessons, life lessons or lessons learned in business, then we can do things differently.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I'm
Yeah.
very sorry for your friend's loss, but at the same time, silver lining thought being, I'm so grateful that all of this grew up out of that.
Yeah.
And, it's kind of interesting that we're talking about this now because the very exact same situation where someone knows something is not working and does not tell others, look, we need to watch out for this. This is going to make a big impact if we don't get this handled or get this
Yeah.
fixed. We're seeing that now on a worldwide scale with the very
Absolutely.
reason why we're talking today. The coronavirus. If
Yeah.
people had been a little bit more, hey, there's a potential disaster on the horizon. Can we all work together on this?
Yeah.
Would have created an entirely different outcome than what we're dealing with right now.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I had the opportunity last weekend to speak to a hospital in Michigan. They asked me if I could. This was a lot of pressure too, by the way. They asked me if I could speak to management all the way down to the nurses and the floor managers and all that. And they do it every weekend. They do a Sunday kickoff call, getting ready for the next week. So I was able to go on there, and I was on there a bit early, about 30 minutes early, as I was waiting to speak. And my talk, interesting enough, was resiliency, leadership, maintaining a positive attitude through the entire situation of
Mm-hmm.
what we're going through. What they were talking about was the lessons learned and how they needed to do things different going into the next week and how they could capture that. Why I say it was a lot of pressure was the two people I followed. So if anybody follows sports, the first week speaker was Skip Kelly, the Notre Dame football coach. The second week speaker was Mike Izzo, the Michigan, or Coach Izzo, the Michigan State basketball coach, Michigan State University basketball coach. And then you had little Matt Currin, following all up. So
Oh, come on. You're Penske's helicopter pilot. You can hang with the big dogs.
well, it's good. It ended up being good because what I talked about now, this is a great story too. What I talked about is I went back to talking about being in Afghanistan and being on the front lines. And then I talked about being an air medical pilot and being again there. But I talked about the support of my wife during all of that time and how great it was to have her supporting me, and how people supported us as military men and women. It was great. The country was all behind us, still are behind veterans. But I really talked about and poured in talking about my wife being there for me and all that. Well, the other day I asked my wife to send me a picture of her from work, and when she sent me the picture from work, she has her PPE on. She has her full gear on because she's a emergency department nurse.
Hmm.
And so that particular day, she had the spot of if anybody came in that needed to be tested for COVID-19, that was her job. So for me, the role has reversed. It was normally me going out there being on the front lines. Now it's her out there on the front lines. So I talked a lot about, hey, you guys are out there on the front lines, and we are, as a country, are so proud of everything that you're doing. But also, it's up to you guys as managers and leaders within your hospital to have your people that are scared, that are nervous, that are working in a high risk environment to be able to look up to you. And so it ended up being a great talk. I really enjoyed it. They were wonderful
That
in the
sounds
process.
phenomenal. And I do want to give a hat, yeah, I do want to give a hat tip to military spouses.
Yeah.
And, um, being a military spouse is no joke. It's no joke. My son in law is a staff sergeant in the Marines
Oh, there
in
you go.
Michigan, actually.
There we go. Simplify.
Yeah. And yeah, well, he was deployed to Afghanistan. If it hadn't been for my grandpuppy, 100-pound golden retriever, you know,
Yeah.
I'm sure that there would have been a whole lot more phone calls to mommy,
Yeah.
at
That's
that
right.
time. So, hats off to the military spouses, whether they be male or female. And thank you
Absolutely.
for your support because
Yeah.
you give the one serving something to come home to and something to stay alive for.
Yeah, and it's so important. I do a lot of work with military men and women, and talk a lot to people about PTSD and those different topics. And it's just it's so important. It's the men and women. It's also the families. It's also all of that really goes into everything that goes on. But it also is important to understand in first responder world, they deal with the same stuff. They deal with the
Yes.
loss. They deal with all the different stuff. So there's a great community actually within Convene called JTF 22 to 0, and they are in support of first responders, in support of military men and women. So just a lot of good things that go on inside of there. But it's so important that we support men and women and families that go through,
Well,
and do what they do.
speaking of the PTSD, I hear you've got a vibrant hope and support segment inside of your convened communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you asking and talking about that. So one of the things that we've been able to do during the COVID-19 is make a pivot, and just like everybody's had to make this pivot business wise, and in making that pivot, we've taken some of our events and we've turned them into live virtual events. And one of them is called the 108 Challenge Live. Eric Burgess leads the 108 Challenge, and he has just a wonderful story of recovery and survival um, from what he went through as a user. Uh, but he started a nonprofit called the 108 Challenge. It's all based around baseball. There's 808 threads on a baseball, and he uses the baseball every day that he's clean. He marks off a thread. Well, he was supposed to have an event, the second annual event local here in North Carolina. Well, he couldn't do that.
Hmm.
So what we've ended up doing, he's the community leader of the Convene Hope and Support community. What we've ended up doing is taking that event and we've moved it to a virtual online community event. And it's blown up. His main speaker that he was supposed to have that night is a man named Michael De Leon from steeredstraight.org, who's one of the most sought after speakers when it comes to drugs and recovery. His nonprofit is great, but people bring him in from all over the country
Hmm.
to speak. So he's still the main keynote speaker. Eric will speak, but we've partnered with Drug Free America. That's one of the largest nonprofits in the country. And the goal is there's two sessions. There's a morning session, and in that morning session, it is geared towards students. So it's a virtual assembly. And so if you are a teacher or you are a school that's out there doing online schooling, and you are looking for your, in your PE or your health classes, if you're looking for a virtual assembly, these are people that speak to schools all the time. It'll be on, a Zoom webinar, Facebook Live, but we will also be recording it and then posting it in the Convene Open Support community. And then the afternoon, session is more geared towards nonprofits. And Amy Rosenhauser of Drug Free America will be running the second afternoon session. But we're talking about how we can continue to expand this community of Convene Hope and Support for, bringing nonprofits together, bringing families together. How can we help the people who are in recovery, and do that through the Convene platform and this community, Convene Hope and Support. So it's going to be a good day. That one's on April 30th, and I'm pretty excited about that event. It's
Awesome.
going to be great.
Awesome. I just want to give a direct shout out to teachers that I know on I've got tons of teachers. My family are
Yeah.
teachers. So, teachers, Barbie Furcus, shouting out to you. And any nonprofit people, please reach out to Matt if you want access to that information.
Yeah.
mcurran55 at outlook.com is his email. That's
Yes.
mcurran55 at outlook.com. Or visit convenecommunities.com. I'm sure that there's a pathway through there that you can
Yeah.
find access to those assemblies and support for you. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. It's right there on the front. And I will tell you this, Convene Communities, any nonprofit school, any nonprofit, it's free to use Convene. It won't cost you a dime or a penny ever. Our mission is really, my mission is to make a difference in people's lives. That's what it's about. It's about helping people change lives. There's people that come into Convene Hope and Support, for example, and that anybody and everybody can come in there. One of the greatest things about Convene is that you can work within the platform with an anonymity,
Mm-hmm.
anonymously. So there's people that come in and write experiences about their battles with depression, for example, and what they're looking for is that feedback from people. And so when people are engaging with them, they're also responding anonymously as well. So the thought process, if you go back to experiential learning, is that a lot of people think that they're alone when they're not alone. They're walking through life with a lot of people that are going down the same path as they are. And there's a lot of great nonprofits. Yoke Fellow Ministries uses Convene to train all of their Yoke Fellow Ministries is a prison ministry. All of their people, because Convene is a learning management system, they use Convene to train all their people before they can go into the prison system. They have to go through a training syllabus, and then they get their certificate at the end, and then they're able to go into that prison system. So
Gotcha.
anywhere in North Carolina.
Awesome. Awesome. Good,
Yeah.
good info. So tell me a little bit about the entrepreneurs area
Yeah.
of all of this.
So
This has been pretty cool.
yeah. So Entrepreneurs Unite is another event that we're having on May 4th, 5th, and 6th. Right now during COVID-19, we are really we're all changing, right? We're all
Mm-hmm.
going through so many changes, and as we're in quarantine and we're business owners and we're looking for different ways to do business, we came up with another live virtual event, and the outpouring and the people that put in to be speakers for it was incredible. We have some just incredible speakers from really all over the world, believe it or not. South Africa, the UK, and then all over the United States.
Nice.
And they're talking about different aspects of being an entrepreneur, how you can change, how you can pivot, um, different things that you can do during these particular times. And so it's really going to be great. We have 5 speakers a day on May 4th, 5th, and 6th. This is because we had so many speakers put in. This will be the first one that we do. But these entrepreneurs will also be using Convene moving forward. So Convene is a site for entrepreneurs. It's a site for nonprofits, a site for anybody really. But entrepreneurs can take Convene and they can use it however they want to, either sell their training through Convene. They can not sell their training. Has a great grouping feature. So if you're a blogger, you're a podcaster, a YouTuber, you're an entrepreneur, it's a site where you can use it to really do whatever you want with it. And so really that event is going to be great. It's really blown up. We have a lot of great speakers on there. Again, you can find information on that, convenecommunities.com. And this is just a series of events that we're going to be doing. Somebody like me who's a speaker, a consultant, an entrepreneur, what Convene allows me to do is when I did go out and speak, it was my leave behind.
Mm-hmm.
I can go in and speak somewhere, and when I get done speaking, everybody's all fired up. It's great. They love what I said. It's
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. About 3 weeks later, they've forgotten who I was. So one of the things Convene allows you to do as a small business entrepreneur is it's now your leave behind. Now you can keep engaging with people. You can keep putting training syllabus in there. You can keep putting content in there. You can teach people how to use it and gather their lessons learned, their experiences. We do it in multiple ways. We have the communities, but there's also white labeled sites as well
Mm-hmm.
where businesses use it as their training management system. They use it through as a learning management system. So again, a long time building this. I've been at it for about 10 years, and it can be used for anything.
As you were just describing that last little bit, the thought occurred to me, hey, it's kind of like Facebook, except for you don't have to be victimized by the algorithm on who gets to see your stuff.
Absolutely. I am so glad you brought that up, Gail, because listen, one, in Convene, you own your content. I will never own any of your content. Your content is your content. Now, we do make sure people do not put anything inappropriate into Convene. We want it to be a safe place. That's for sure. But it is a place where your algorithm, if you inside of your group with your followers, inside of your group, the people that are interacting within your group,
Mm-hmm.
when you put something out, guess what? 100% of the people within your group will see your content and interact with your content. There are no algorithms on the backside of that, and that is important. So, thank you for bringing that up because that's something that is really important because, there will never be anything that compares with Facebook or Instagram or all of those. They are out there, they serve a great purpose. In fact, what we allow people to do is link over to Instagram, share their the communities can be shared over there. The experiences, I call them experiences, but that could be your course or where have you, but we call them experiences. Your groups, everything can be shared to Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter, and then it drives you back to your particular group. But there are no algorithms, so everybody will see your content for sure.
Awesome. Awesome. Would you like to leave us with some final thoughts before we close down and send everybody out into the sunshine in their backyards for the weekend?
That's right. I'm sitting here watching my grass grow out of my window that I have to go mow this afternoon. So, uh, yeah, you know what? We're looking at, with this COVID-19 right now, we don't know as of today, we don't know how long this is going to last. This has changed really how we are going to go forth and do business. There's some things that I know and I've known before this, we are just getting started with Convene. It is really growing rapidly, but I do know this in life, we have similar situations, we have similar passions, we have similar things that we've walked through. And there's a lot more people out there that are more like you than are different. You and I may not like the same things, but there's a community for anything. If we don't have a community, we are looking for community leaders. We want people to come into the site, create different communities, work with us, create different groups, and we're looking to grow. That's really the bottom line. Again, this is not a small undertaking. We've been building this forever, for a long time, and in this time period, it's great for entrepreneurs. We're all looking for different ways to communicate, collaborate, and connect with our audience. We're looking for different ways to sell our content. There is a referral background program in it because some people don't want to create content, but they might want to go out and sell your content for you. So if you'll give a referral fee, we have a base of people who will go out and sell your content for you. So we've looked at really everything that we can do, all the way from the project management in, all the way through to the communication in. And we're just looking for great people. So whatever your passion is, we want you to be a part of Convene. Don't do anything different than you're already doing. Have your websites, have your Facebook, have your YouTube. I have all that. I don't change anything. But just, this is just a platform and a resource that can help you do things differently.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much for what you've done and what you're continuing to do, Matthew.
Well,
It's
thank
been
you.
an honor to join you today.
Well, thank you, Gail, for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend, Facebook. Take care.
When you open yourself up to
Thank you.
actual energy work, makes that recovery progress so much faster. That recovery is possible. You do not have to live as a victim until your last days. You have unbelievable strength, and I know that because you're still here. Do you want to create something completely unrecognizable with your life? I can show you how.